Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. 5 years of brutal fighting during a civil war in South Sudan could formally be coming to an end on Thursday. South Sudanese opposition leader Riek Machar is expected to sign a final peace deal with President Salva Kiir's government. Machar says PLM in opposition and mediators for Kiir have held several weeks of talks in Khartoum, Sudan, to finalize a comprehensive peace agreement to end the conflict, which has killed tens of thousands of, of people and left more than 4 million displaced from their homes. Earlier, Machar and South Sudan Opposition Alliance said they refused to sign the draft because it had not spelled out the number of states South Sudan will have or their boundaries. It remains unclear whether the other opposition groups will sign the deal on Thursday. Now, British Prime Minister Theresa May met with Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta in Nairobi on Thursday after arriving for the third and final leg of her trade mission to Africa. President Kenyatta welcomed May's assurance that Kenya's duty-free exports would continue after Brexit. The two leaders signed agreements to enhance military cooperation and for Britain to return assets and proceeds of corruption to Kenya. Following meetings with the leaders of South Africa and Nigeria, May urged Kenyatta to forge close economic ties with Britain as it prepares to leave the European Union in March 2019. Britain is Kenya's largest trading partner.
So as Britain prepares to leave the European Union, we're committed to a smooth transition that ensures continuity in our trading relationship with Kenya, ensuring Kenya retains its duty-free, quota-free access to the UK market, and to building on our strong trade and investment ties to create even more opportunities for our businesses and for our consumers.
Well, in April, Britain hosted a meeting of Commonwealth countries, including South Africa, Kenya and Nigeria, seeking to reinvigorate the network of mostly former colonies and drum up new trade among its members. Well, another European leader, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, kicked off a short-trip Africa tour on Wednesday with an overnight visit to Senegal. Merkel is meeting with the presidents of Senegal, Ghana and Nigeria as she presses for further investment in a region that is a source of many of the migrants who make their perilous way toward Europe. Speaking at a news conference alongside Senegalese President Macky Sall in Dakar, Merkel spoke about trip to promote investments in Africa.
The president said to me in our meetings that perhaps the perception of African countries is still too negative, given the opportunities for development that he just mentioned. And if you only ever see the risks, if you only focus on the risks that you are taking on, then perhaps you are not giving Africa enough credit. Just as sometimes an idealized picture is painted of Europe, a somewhat gloomy picture is painted of Africa.
Well, Thursday, Merkel arrived in Ghana, where she will meet the Ghanaian president before proceeding to Nigeria, where she will conclude her African trip. Well, now to the ongoing migrant crisis. Hundreds of migrants have been relocated in Tripoli, Libya, from government-run detention centers after getting trapped by clashes between rival groups. United Nations and aid sources said Thursday the migrants had been abandoned after their guards fled, fighting by rival groups battling for power and state funds. Meanwhile, in Vienna, Austria, European defense ministers met on Thursday to discuss possible solutions to the issue of migrants' disembarkation. Italy has threatened, in fact, to bar ships of the European Union naval force from bringing migrants picked up in the Mediterranean to its ports unless the bloc comes up with ways to share the burden of taking them in. EU officials have said Rome has given them until the end of August to come up with a clear relocation plan for rescued migrants.
We have to face the issue of the routes of disembarkation. I want to stress the fact that this is an issue that doesn't concern only Operation Sophia, but is much broader than this. Still, it's an issue we cannot ignore, so I will ask ministers today guidance on how to address and solve this issue. We have been discussing during the summer, July and August, some proposals to solve this issue, including some proposals of mediation I have put on the table in the last weeks. So far, consensus has not been found.
Yes, European Union Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini said that no consensus had been found yet and that finding a solution will require a constructive attitude from all. To the south now, anti-immigrant violence has flared sporadically in South Africa against the background of high unemployment, with foreigners accused of taking jobs from South Africans and being involved in crime. Eyewitnesses' video captured on Wednesday showed people tussling for a crate carrying bottled drinks outside shops in Soweto. As police say, foreign-owned shops were looted in the South African township. A number of shops in Soweto are owned by nationals of other African nations, including Somalis and Ethiopians, along with Pakistanis and Bangladeshis. In recent years, Zimbabweans and Mozambican migrants have also been targets of attacks. Now, earlier this month, the U.S. Secretary of Defense, Jim Mattis, told reporters he had received reports from both the U.S. Africa Command and U.S. Special Operations Command detailing suggested changes to operation policies in Africa following the deadly attack on U.S. forces in Niger last year. The Pentagon correspondent Carla Babb asked Mattis about these reports during a press briefing this week.
We are making changes on the personnel assignment policy. As you know, one of the things we uncovered was some of those troops did not train together what we thought was for a sufficiently long enough time. We have changed some of the training requirements as well. But as far as our continued operations there, we continue in support of the French-led Trans-Sahel effort down there, and in building our partner nations' capacity to fight this enemy. Yes.
An AFRICOM investigation of the ambush last October that killed 4 U.S. soldiers attracted immense scrutiny to the previously low-key U.S. counterterrorism campaign in Niger. And moving and settling in another country is a big change in life. In time, one has to deal with the issue of identity. A new book tells the stories of how certain African immigrants found a new identity in the United States and how, by telling their stories, became catalysts of change, both in the United States and their countries of origin. Want to tell us more? I'm joined in studio by Benga Ogumjimi, author of Borderless Voice.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome to our studio. So first, you have a very interesting title. Tell us about the title and what really inspired you to put these stories together.
The title, Borderless Voice, the power of telling your story and defining your identity, is this overarching message that everyone has a story to tell. And the moment we take on the agency of telling our story rather than having someone tell your story for you, you have come to a point where you become transcendent. And then you overcome any external obstacles that may prevent you from expressing your borderless voice.
Mm-hmm. Now, everybody has a story for sure. What makes some of the stories you put together unique?
Well, the first story in the book started with 19-year-old Agbani Dorego. She's the very first Miss World winner that happens to be a black woman from Nigeria. When that happened, she changed the definition of beauty around the world and gave people of color, particularly black people, this new voice of identity. Further along the book, you will read about stories of people who come from various communities. You'll see it happen in fashion, happen in technology. One of the stories in the book is about how an impact investor without a business plan, without resources, just by telling our own story, built a multi-million investment fund. So it's all about the power of telling the story, and Agbani Dorego opened that doorway, that floodgates.
Mm-hmm. And now here we're talking about also how this new identity and the kind of the experience has become kind of has influenced how they have operated not only here, but some of the things they've done back in their countries of origin. What are some of the examples you have?
Well, several of the examples in the book, particularly those who come from the minority communities in the United States that might be classified as minority or immigrant. Vast majority of Africans will fit that demographic. If you come with that, you have double negative. And so because of that, there's a struggle to articulate and speak in your own true voice. So one of the stories in the book, including my own personal coming to America story, happened in Atlanta Airport. And it was when I had a defining moment that I don't have to identify by the minority or the immigrant label. I chose to identify as an international entrepreneur. And that was my turning point of my own career. And it's the same message that you'll see resonates across the book.
Yeah. Now, you've been here for a few years, and there are some who have been here for even much longer. How would you describe the experience of an immigrant, say, 20 years ago, perhaps longer, and what immigrants might be going through today as we speak?
Well, it's a global world, and the boundaries that we know are now really shrinking. So it's an opportunity for everyone to find their own voice. So we now have an opportunity of media, of social media, and that gives us enormous responsibility of leadership. Also how we serve the community and change making in those communities. So with this new environment that we have now, it's imperative that we tell our story, but from in the community, there's a struggle with identity. Do I identify as Black? Do I identify as African? Do I identify as African and American? So these are the ageless conversation that those 20 years ago had, and is still having now, and we are still having now. So my proposition and value proposition in the book is you have to tell your story by yourselves. And whether they be cultural, geographical, financial, the ultimate barrier to overcome is your own self-perception. Once you do that, you can tell a whole new story.
And we know that people come from all sorts of backgrounds, different countries. Do you sometimes encounter people who seem to be unwilling to identify with their countries of origin and want to acquire a totally new identity, but others want to straddle the two? They want to be Americans and also Africans at the same time.
Well, again, I think the responsibility and the agency starts with you. And the moment in which you define the identity, that best resonates sometimes with not even who you are, but who you are becoming, because identity is fluid, it changes. And if you are becoming this new identity, the book helps you to articulate that message and have that message with still retaining a healthy sense of authenticity and say, this is really who I am, or this is who I am becoming. When I shared my story, like, I decided to become an international entrepreneur, and because of that, that changes my reality in the United States. So that would be my message. You have to take on the agency of telling your own story and defining your identity.
All right. Hope you'll include my personal story in your next book.
Yes, let's do that.
Thank you very much, Benga, for joining us today and sharing the accounts of the Borderless Voice, the book that you put together. Benga Ogunjimi is the author of Borderless Voice.
Thank you.
Now, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Still ahead on Africa 54, the World Health Organization sounds the alarm on the DRC's Ebola outbreak. But first, a look at Thursday's headlines.
That will unlock the incredible potential of the next generation to benefit both our countries.
La coopération sénégalo-allemande se porte bien. Elle remonte à 1960.
Ce qui leur importe, c'est d'exécuter.
It's extremely important for Africa, indeed, for China as well, and provide China and Africa with an opportunity to build a mutually benefit relationship.
Well, the number of Ebola cases in Democratic Republic of Congo is declining, but the World Health Organization chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus says it's still too soon to say that the outbreak is stabilizing due to difficulties identifying new cases near rebel-controlled areas. Some areas close to the outbreak's epicenter in the town of Mangina are off limits to health workers for security reasons, hampering efforts to control the spread of the disease. Since the latest outbreak was declared on August 1st, 112 confirmed and probable cases have been identified in eastern Congo's North Kivu and Ituri provinces, including 75 deaths, according to the latest data from Congo's health ministry. Now, taking a low dose of aspirin every day has been known to help people who have already had a heart attack. But major new research has found the risks do not outweigh the benefits for most other people. VOA's Faith Lapidus has the details.
While aspirin is what many people reach for to relieve headaches and muscle pain, doctors have long recommended taking a daily low-dose aspirin for preventing a heart attack, stroke, or other heart problems in people who have already had one.
It's clear that people who have had heart attacks or most strokes can benefit from taking a baby aspirin every day. It's very important. It reduces your future risk of stroke, heart attack, and can make you live longer.
Now, major research has tested whether aspirin can help prevent first-time heart problems. And the results of 3 separate studies indicate no. One study looked at more than 12,000 patients at moderate risk of a heart problem because of other health issues like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, or smoking. The results showed no benefit, perhaps because they were taking other medications that lowered the risk anyway.
The risk that a person has changes over time, and some of that change is due to some of the things that we do, like managing their risk factors and then taking care of them when they develop symptoms.
Another study of more than 15,000 adults with diabetes found the good aspirin did was outweighed by a greater risk of serious bleeding.
We also saw almost a 30% increased risk in major bleeding. So that was bleeding bad enough to get you into hospital, mainly from the gut, or bleeding into the eye or brain. And if it was into the eye, it was bad enough to threaten your sight.
Based on these studies revealed this weekend at the European Society of Cardiology, the advice does not change. Doctors say aspirin best benefits people who already have heart disease. Faith Lapidus, VOA News.
Well, some medical experts are warning that technology addiction is a growing problem as people's daily lives increasingly revolve around their devices. Companies and governments are working to alleviate the problem. VOA's Jill Craig has more.
It may be difficult to imagine the days before digital devices consumed our lives. But some experts warn that constant attachment to our phones, tablets, computers, and other devices is negatively affecting our health.
At an ordinary level, for many people, particularly the impact of sleep debt, because they're not sleeping enough, because of the light from screens, and overuse, particularly of social media and games, means that depression and anxiety are more likely.
Different studies place the number of those with tech addiction between 1% and 6%.
But as we're seeing a convergence of different rewards that you can get through the use of technology, and we're spending more of our time on screen working, playing, creating, fighting, whatever it is, we're actually living through the devices more and more, and then living without them is becoming a real issue.
Google has announced a digital well-being dashboard, and Apple is expected to launch a digital detox feature later this year. France has effectively banned after-work emails and soon will introduce laws to prevent students from using mobile phones on school grounds. Tanya Gooden, who ran a tech business for more than 20 years, says parents are giving their children devices at young ages.
You see what I call digital babysitting, where a parent gives a child a phone just to, for a few minutes apiece. So yeah, it is starting earlier and earlier.
Gooden now runs a company that offers digital detox retreats, where people switch off their phones and instead participate in nature activities.
To be honest, the simplest thing to do is just to put our phones out of sight, because all the software we have on our phone relies on us actually being able to see it, to see the buzzes, the banners, the notifications. Muting it is also a really good thing to do. But if it's out of sight, it really is out of mind.
For many of us, however, it is perhaps easier said than done. Jill Craig, VOA News, Washington.
For Muslims living in the United States are sharing the happiness and joy of their Eid celebrations with non-Muslims, especially when Muslims sacrifice an animal and share the meat with the poor and needy. VOA's Vadda Khalil recently visited a residential area in Silver Spring, Maryland, where a local Muslim organization distributed more than 2,700 kilos of meat to the community.
Most people standing in line at this residential complex in Silver Spring, Maryland, are from Latin America. And even though they are not Muslims, today is a special day for them. As in previous years, representatives from the Montgomery County Muslim Federation are including them in their Eid festivities by distributing the meat of sacrificed animals.
I know their work and their organization. They help the Latin community greatly. They are loving and respectful.
We're grateful because they come every year and they just give us like the meat and all that stuff, so we're grateful for that.
A senior citizen community is the next stop, where the gesture is also appreciated. Abdul Hai Sheikh has been a volunteer for years. He says such initiatives from the Muslim community are important to bring people from different religions in the United States together.
Help the community here and give something to the underprivileged. And doing so, we can create a better bond between the local community and the Muslim community. There is better understanding.
Thank you. People really, really like to come here.
This year, the Muslim Federation collected $21,000 from the Muslim community to sacrifice animals for Eid and distribute meat in 8 different locations. Vadda Khalil, VOA News, Maryland.
Well, it's an event that takes place just 1 week a year, but former U.S. President Jimmy Carter and former First Lady Rosalind Carter's Habitat for Humanity work project is one of the most identifiable aspects of their legacy. As viewers can find out reports outside South Bend, Indiana, it's been an emotional journey for the Carters and their growing army of volunteers.
The sound of construction is music to the ears of country music star Garth Brooks.
That sound you're hearing right there, man, that's love.
For single mother Erica Santiestepan, it's the sound of hope.
I feel like I won the lotto. It means everything. Like I don't have to worry about where am I going to go next.
That's because when the trusses Brooks is working on are finally raised, it will form the roof over Santiestepan's new home.
I usually don't ever win anything, and today I'm winning it all. So.
But she isn't getting anything for free. Santiestepan will have a mortgage, an affordable one thanks to Habitat for Humanity's no-interest loan, paid for by her own sweat equity.
Homeowners put in 250 hours of sweat equity. It's a hand up, not a handout.
Country music singer Trisha Yearwood and her husband, Garth Brooks, are 2 volunteers among hundreds, building houses in this Habitat for Humanity Jimmy and Rosalind Carter work project, which the former president and first lady started in 1984.
Since they got involved, we've been able to partner with 13.2 million people to have new rehabbed or repaired homes. And right now we're at a pace that we're partnering with a family somewhere in the world every 50 seconds. And there's really no one that has had more to do with that in terms of building the reputation of Habitat than President and Mrs. Carter.
Not intense heat nor advanced age. Not even cancer has kept them from building houses across the United States and 14 countries, working alongside volunteers like Suzanne Taylor.
And he said once that he's going to do as much as he can with as much as he can for as long as he can because his faith demands it. And I think it's a lesson to all of us to maybe get off the couch a couple more times and go do something to make the world a better place.
Every human being probably would like some excitement in their life, some challenge in their life, some particular thing for which they are grateful in the future, some obstacle to overcome, some things of which they can be proud. And Habitat answers all those questions for me.
Erica Santiestepan didn't know anything about the Carters before the project began, but now she'll be living in a community built in part by the Carters' compassion.
Without them, I couldn't do it. I wouldn't have this. I wouldn't know where I would be next year. So I'm so grateful, like from the bottom of my heart.
Just to see the expression on their face, they start crying first and then I start crying right behind them. So it's a matter of deep emotion for me on occasion, and I'm already kind of emotional about this project, as you can probably tell.
A project that will put 23 new homes on the map of Mishawaka, Indiana this year, joining over 4,000 more built since 1984 by a former president who grew up in a house with no running water or electricity. Kane Fairbaugh, VOA News, Mishawaka, Indiana.
Welcome back to Africa 54, and here's what's trending. Insomniacs that could be soothed to sleep by a soft sleep robot, seen at the IFA Consumer Electronics Show in Berlin. The Somnax sleep robot was developed by engineers from the Technology University at Delft Robotics Institute, who aim to replicate human breathing techniques that make users fall asleep more quickly. The crowd-funded robot, which looks more like a pillow, combines movements that resemble breathing with soothing sounds. It is intended to be cuddled by the user overnight. The developers have included meditative music, ambient sounds on the smartphone app that accompanies the robot, which also allows users to upload their own audio files. Well, next up, it's a universal struggle, finding enough time to exercise alongside a busy work and social schedule. For those who haven't got hours to spare in the gym, express fitness classes may be the solution. They involve a quick, high-intensity workout class of 20, 25, or 30 minutes. The high-intensity interval training consists of rotating maximum effort with recovery periods of 40 to 50% of the maximum heart rate. The method has ranked in the top 3 fitness trends for the last 3 years. Meanwhile, in low-tech news, no, you're not looking at a set for a new Lord of the Rings movie. This dome-shaped house is the centerpiece of the village of Borisova in Russia, called the House of the Sun. It was built by a couple who decided they wanted to live closer to nature. Measuring 12 meters in diameter, it has a total living area of 150 square meters. Around the house, there is a wall of soil for keeping the floor in the house warm. During summer, it's a bed of pumpkins. The side of the house facing the south is the Kocha of the Sun. There are many windows so that the sun's energy can get inside the house during the day and stay for the night. And that's what's trending today. Well, and that's our show for today. Thanks a lot for watching, and we hope to see you again tomorrow. Have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. So, you know what happy is, and medium comes between small and large.
To find a happy medium.
So, is this idiom about feeling kind of happy?
How is it going with your neighbor? Is he still complaining about your playing the trombone at night?
He was, but it's fine now.
How did you guys work it